Hello, good afternoon, everybody. May I ask our panelists to join us for this session on refocusing destination impact. Welcome, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of the host city delegates who have very kindly joined this business events conference session with a particular focus on association meetings. My name is Aileen Crawford and I am the head of the Glasgow Convention Bureau and I am the moderator of the session today, and it is my absolute pleasure to introduce our session panellists. So firstly, may I introduce Emily Blitz. Emily is the Congress Director of the International AIDS Association. Thank you very much for joining us, Emily. Much appreciated. We also have Nicky Redmond. Nicky is the director of her own company, Refocus Communications, and many years an expert in conference organising as well. From our venue perspective, we're absolutely delighted that Angie van der Broecke from the KL Convention Centre in Malaysia has stayed up late to join us. Welcome, Angie. And our very own Neil Brownlee, the head of the Business Tourism Events Unit at VisitScotland, is kindly joining the panel. So as you can see, we have a cross-section of some of the conference association industry world with us to look at where we are at the moment and just to consider how we all work together in partnership moving forward. If you do have any questions or want to say hi, you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen here a little button that says session. Please say hello, let us know that you're here with us. And if you do have a question, please do a queue first so we know that you have a question for the panel. And Nicky will very kindly bring the question forward for the panel. So thanks again for joining us, everybody. I think, first of all, Emily, we're going to start with you. We've got 3 areas that we want to cover today in the short hour that we have together. We want to be able to look at the issues faced by association conference directors such as yourself at the moment and how we as the industry can support where we can, and give some examples from across the panel here. Oh, Virginie, my apologies, I forgot Virginie here, my colleague and friend from Brussels Convention Bureau. Apologies, Virginie. I've only got 5 of you to look at and I'm failing miserably already. So Virginie, thank you very much for joining us as the Convention Bureau friend and colleague. The second point, after the Congress directors' issues and what keeps Emily awake at night, we're going to look at COVID-ready solutions, what's happening out there, and to share some stories. And then we're going to finish on the conference legacy. Where do we sit with that, and is it still relevant in the world ahead? So without further ado, now I'll get myself organised. We're going to come to yourself, Emily, and just really be able to set the scene for us, for you and the IAS. What issues are you facing? How can we help? Please set the scene for us.
Certainly. Thank you so much, Aileen. And thank you, everyone, for joining. I am walking out of, so to speak, my virtual board meeting and stepping into this. So this is really top of everyone's minds in terms of the IAS leadership. And I think this is something that's echoing across the association world, is the desperation to get back on site and have the ability to reconnect with people in person, recognizing though, however, that there is now the drive and the need and the ability to augment those in-person meetings with a hybrid offering. So I think the things that keep me up at night are both short-term and long-term concerns. One of the acronyms that I learned as a conference director this year was API, which is the magic thing that connects my internal CRM with other platforms out there. I have no idea how it works, but for me, the API that I'm looking for from venues and from convention bureaus out there is the agility, partnership, and insight. In terms of agility, we as associations need your understanding of how complex our world is in terms of juggling the The revenue streams that we have to manage our budgets that, particularly going into next year, have been impacted by the either postponement or cancellation of our conferences this year. And so in terms of that agility, simple things like adjustments or amendments to cancellation policies would be on venues or on in hotel negotiations would do wonders for the association world to be able to take that step back into the brave new world of confirming on-site presence months or even years in advance. So other things like partnerships in terms of the development that both we as associations, but what we're going to be looking for in venues in terms of the absolutely gold standard connectivity with the rest of the world as this demand for the virtual conferencing or hybrid events continues into the next iteration of what our world looks like. Things like on-site studios or bandwidth that doesn't cost an association an arm and a leg to have guaranteed that it will work. So those are just some simple kind of collective partnership things that we would be looking for. And also just in terms of the insight that you all as the boots on the ground can help us with. COVID recommendations differ country to country and are constantly changing. So on a very, very practical short-term basis, just having those things translated and providing us not with a list of preferred, not only with a list of preferred AV suppliers, but lists of on-site or local labs that we can run COVID tests in, and how much does a rapid test cost if we have an outbreak? What are the local protocols that we as external associations jumping into your city or your country for a week would need to know and prepare our delegates about, and how those continue to evolve over time is really something that is difficult for us sitting in our association headquarters to know about and constantly be trying to synthesize, particularly if they're published in the native language of the destination rather than the language of the association. So it's those little things, it's those big things. It's, again, we all can't wait to be coming back and having in-person events with the support and yeah, open arms that associations love to work with host cities, but we just need to figure out the best way to make that happen.
Thank you very much, Emily. Lots to think around there. And of course, you know, this is Host City, the 6th edition. And we would have all loved to have had you in our city. And I'm now welcoming you into my dining room. So yeah, very different than the host city that I think any of us would have expected, and can completely understand what Emily and her Congress team are going through for the future conference there. So the point you mentioned there, Emily, around contracts, Angie, as a venue, you've been living and breathing this with all of the business that should have been taking place at the KLCC this year. Have you got any comments, thoughts, suggestions, advice for Emily around that partnership flexibility from a venue perspective?
Yes, well, firstly, thank you so much for inviting me into the session, and thanks to all the virtual participants. Nice to meet you, as I always say, and fellow panelists. You know, it's so interesting listening to Emily, because I really believe that associations, venues, and I'm sure even bureaus have been on a parallel journey in terms of being kept awake at night about all these kinds of issues. And if I may just take a minute to talk a little bit about I think we went through 5 key phases, and then really to talk about where we are right now, which is really working on addressing the types of concerns that international associations have around their planning and preparation for resumption of the events in venues, whether there's a traditional event format with in-person attendance or hybrid components. So I think the first thing we dealt with really was the impact of COVID. And like you said, that came with all the postponements, the cancellations, force majeure, travel restrictions, revenue decline, financial losses, and of course, throughout that, the first phase of the impact was really all about our clients. It wasn't even about the state of the venue. And so what we were doing, and I think we've done a bit of canvassing around a lot of venues globally to get a shared perspective. I think the first thing people did was really adapt a very flexible approach, because it wasn't the time to be rigid. Everybody was experiencing something for the first time. So, for example, there wasn't charges on postponements. There was case-by-case discussion around how cancellations would take place or would have to be accommodated. When it came to issues around force majeure, not everybody's contract is the same, but in the instance of our venue, for example, if the restrictions were imposed by government and we couldn't do the events, then of course force majeure would apply. So those were sort of the things that happened right at the beginning. And then we went on to the response, and we immediately started to look at what we needed to do to prepare our venue and to respond to the impact of COVID. So we started immediately with our SOP development and application. We basically had to maintain strong communication with the government and the industry supply chain, and keep looking at what was happening around the world around any kind of best practice application. And most importantly, we started the partnership process early, not only with our venues, but industry collaboration, because we really had to lobby government to get all kinds of distinctions. We had to distinguish ourselves from mass gatherings and convince government that, you know, international meetings happen in a controlled, regulated environment in purpose-built facilities for meetings. So we went through that, and then the next phase was about being venue ready, team ready, and client ready. And that was really about us applying all the communication on-site, reconfiguration for physical distancing, changing our floor plans, our capacity charts. And of course, for our team, it was about upskilling, reskilling, and implementing a very comprehensive health and safety plan. Then we moved on to, I think, adaptation. And that was really about how we would control our new working environment. And what we spent a lot of time doing to give our clients confidence was we mapped out the organizer journey, and we also mapped out the attendee journey. So we could look at the entire process from pre-arrival on site, during the event, and event planning. And of course, we are now in our, what I would call, advancement and resumption phase. And this is really where it's about demonstrating assurance and trust to our clients, and really giving very tangible examples of events that we are doing and what kind of track record that we are building up. I think the important thing really is also that we need to ensure we are depending on our bureaus as well to help us navigate this process together. And I think maybe I can come back to just where we are now. Do you want me to stop, or do you want me to?
No, carry on. That's really good. We'll bring in the other.
Okay. So I think I want to just talk a little bit about where we are. But basically, what we've decided to do is to build an event planning toolkit for international associations. And we want to say to our clients, please let us develop an event strategy together with you and with the Convention Bureau. So we are busy in that toolkit. We are busy with a very comprehensive communications plan. And in this is information provision that is destination specific and locally contextualized, because that's important. And there are some key communication essentials that we have to combine in that process. The second is around the comprehensive safety plan. And that's really about how we are applying strict compliance to the venue SOPs and issues around how testing and tracing is managed, COVID-19 hygiene and sanitization, what is being provided in terms of rapid testing, and even now with the impact of the vaccine, how is this going to apply? And we have, for example, developed a dedicated COVID-19 information platform on our website. And we're also busy with a virtual, we're busy building a virtual tour so that our clients can come in and they can actually experience an interactive virtual tour because they can't get on site. So that's all in progress at the moment. The next one is really around what I call the flexibility issue, and that's about the contracting and the venue specifics. And like I said, for that, you really need to walk the organizer journey and look at the entire phase. And this would be part of what we develop into our event strategy with the client and also in the event planning toolkit, and address all the issues that we need to around, for example, space. You know, clients are asking, because of physical distancing, how are you applying your pricing when it comes to, we say we're not charging you for the venue. We have to look at how we actually charge a rate that is taking into account the requirements around physical distance. So we have redone our capacity chart completely, also to accommodate those requirements and to be mindful of what the cost sensitivity issues might be around that. I think the last thing is really converging virtual events into your traditional events strategy, and that's all about being hybrid ready. So here we've built technical expertise, we've built studios, we have a command center, we have a green studio, we have a virtual platform solution, and we are focused very much on the supplier partnerships as well, and also the technical knowledge and expertise, and most importantly, the infrastructure, the bandwidth, the strong uninterrupted power supply, ventilation, and I can assure you these are things that every international venue around the world, it's keeping everybody awake at night. We want to be ready to deliver an absolutely comprehensive toolkit that really makes our international associations clients feel assured that we're going to hold their hand every step of the way, but we're going to learn as we go as well, because I think it's a journey that's new for all of us. Thank you,
Angie. Thank you very much. So, Emily, how does that make you feel when you hear the planning from Angie there and what the team have gone through? Is that what you're looking for from your venue partners moving forward? Does that answer your concerns?
Sure, and I completely recognize that the challenges of the year behind us were felt on all sides. It's true. The two venues that we had booked for our event in this summer in San Francisco and in Oakland, yes, they completely respected the force majeure. I think it's and going forward, that's when we're going to with our future bookings, that's when we're going to need the agility and flexibility piece. I think it's fantastic, the work that Angie is speaking of in terms of developing the tools that we need to sit here at home, but still be able to do our site visits. I've attended quite a number of virtual site visits in Latin America, in Africa, in North America, over these past few months, and you know, they get better and better with each time. The first couple ones were on a WhatsApp call, kind of walking around the venue, and now they're getting better and better. So it's great. I think, again, as Angie said, taking those steps together, recognizing that we're both learning, and the predictability that we all would love to have, is not something that we're able to achieve right now.
Thank you very much.
Can I just,
yes,
can I just say, Angeline, it sounds fantastic what KL have been doing, and as an organizer of events, it's critical for me to be able to persuade my clients or their board members that having a hybrid event is actually going to be safe, and our delegates are going to be safe, but also that if in the understanding that it's going to be a hybrid event, that also our online delegates are having a great experience as well. So I think that hearing what you're saying and the actions that you're putting into place, assuming that other venues will be following the same sort of ideas, and like our government's working together, which hasn't kind of worked so well, if the industry is going to be working in that way, so that as an organizer, I know that the information I'm going to get from convention bureaus is going to be consistent, that they are thinking along the same lines of all the things that I have to worry about, and what I need to be able to present to my clients or their boards to make it a safe option would be, you know, is fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think is crucial around this whole idea of an event planning toolkit is that it just be the venue and the client, it should be with the bureau, because we are representing the destination, and it's absolutely crucial. And I think the other thing that is so important, which I didn't mention when we look at all the issues around risk management and the agility, is also that we constantly need to think about the aspect of scenario planning, because it's so at the moment. So I think those are the kinds of things that, and that's why I think the communication is going to be so essential. And I think when you start to look at the event planning, I mean, I think the toolkit is one thing, but the event strategy and how that rolls out is something that is also it has to be a collaborative effort with all the local key stakeholders involved, but then also our international client and, of course, the bureau. And support from government is crucial also.
So on that point, Virginie, can I bring you in as the Brussels Convention Bureau, just listening to the conversation there? Can you add how you've adapted, how you've changed, how are things for you now that support this venue and association partnership?
Hi. Yeah, since the COVID breakout, so we had to rethink a lot of things. So we started health safety label. So a lot of venues, hotels, and so on, museums can apply to have this health safety label, and it's of course it's a collaboration between us as Visit Brussels, not only at the Convention Bureau, but the whole all our stakeholders, and it helps them a lot to secure the future, because then they can show I'm safe for events, I'm safe for visits, or so on. And of course, we had a huge conversation with our government to see how they could help us, helping our partners, but clients also financially. So they gave us funds that we could give to venues, to hotels, to museums, but also to clients, to associations. So they had to apply for them. And there were a lot of criteria that they had to fill in. But a lot of them received these funds for the future, so they can actually secure some events in Brussels for the next years. So they received an amount of money to organize the events or to secure the venue or the hotel.
Oh, I think we've lost a couple of visitors.
Yes.
We lost a couple of visitors, but we'll carry on. So I was going to come to you, Neil, next, because of that discussion around this COVID ready and what we've been doing that's COVID ready. Welcome back, Nicky. It's just saying, you know, does everything have to change? Are there some things that COVID ready has been a good thing? Are there some things we think we should keep, Neil? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I mean, I'll circle back to some of what people have been saying, but I was pleased that Angeline confirmed that the operators, the venues, you know, they are the experts, whether it's hotels or venues, they're way ahead of this. And I think governments around the world have been slow to understand that the sector, whether it's the venues or the hotels, they just need to know, they don't need to know the how. They can do the how. They need to know the when and at what distance. And this has been a sticking point for, I think, most countries in terms of trying to articulate the expertise of our sector and our operators. So Hilton, Marriott, IHG, they're not waiting for their governments to tell them how to clean a room to make it COVID safe. As far back as April, the big hotel chains were tying up with Ecolab, Lysol, and other organizations and products that, with a vaccine on its way, we no longer have to take intravenously. We can just have the vaccine. But the hotel groups have this covered, the operators of the Scottish Event Campus, the EICC, and KL, you know, they've had this covered from months ago. And I think what that means is for the convention bureaus, Aileen does exactly the same job as me at a city level. I do it at a national level. It's for us to try and make sure that when we get through to the end of COVID, with pandemic, whatever that looks like, we can take the opportunity to reposition business events and what we do, up to and including relabeling the entire sector, because we know that business is not, strictly speaking, what people like Emily do. It's fundamentally not what the first thing is that you do. You're changing the world for better. You're not an incentive group or a corporate meeting, but they're equally very, very important. The initial question that you threw at me in terms of what we might want to keep, I think, you know, when we've all had our vaccine, or perhaps by the middle of next year, end of next year, I don't think there should be a time where we go to the supermarket or to McDonald's and there isn't something to put on our hands, or there aren't mitigations in place. And somebody who I work closely with said, every time I go to a trade show, IMEX America, IBTM, Meeting Show, Frankfurt, I come back and I feel awful. And now we know why, because there was no basic mitigations in place. And I think there are quite a few mitigations that, frankly, we should keep. We shouldn't throw up all the precautions just because we have a vaccine. I think hand gel should stay. I think perhaps plastic screen at registration, all sorts of, you know, restricting the touch points, but getting the meaningful face-to-face bit back, which is what we're missing, and what we all get from face-to-face meetings.
Thank you very much, Neil. Interesting to see which parts you're, as a venue, you want to keep, Angie. These things that you think, actually, this works fabulously for us.
Yes, I think they are. I think a lot of the things, and I would talk here for a minute about the whole idea of sustainability management. You know, if you look at the way we have to handle food and beverage now, I think there is a way to prevent more wastage, because of the volume of food you normally present on a buffet. Now the way we have to serve food is completely different. So I think that's a good thing. I think there's a lot of ways that you can use technology to make things contactless. For example, you don't have to have menus in print paper. You can be more responsible about your waste management. I think a lot of even when you look at configuring your room space and how you can reuse configurations, I think also when it comes to what I don't think we should ever lose now is how we've had to take this opportunity to skill our workforce and to upskill, because now we are actually developing future leaders for our industry. We are helping people with job sustainability. And I think that's really good. And I think what we definitely can't lose is the incredible collaboration that has happened across the industry supply chain. And it's also helps us put the business events industry, as Neil mentioned, at the forefront of the agenda with government, because we have such a challenge getting our industry recognized. And you know how important it is as you know, that we're part of the knowledge economy, that we contribute to immense social impact, and we are also trying to demonstrate that venues are infrastructure city assets. If you need a place to administer the vaccines, when cities needed hospitals and they had to use convention centres. Yeah. So there's a lot of positive things. You know, it's sport venues that have to diversify their revenue streams, they have to think differently, they have to service clients differently. So I think, you know, it's been extremely painful, what many of us have been through, but, you know, I think there's so many good positive things that we can retain and we can use and learn from.
That's great. And so, Virginie, let's bring you back, because this is all leading into the final point of the discussion that I know is very close to all of our hearts, and is around what it means for a conference legacy. And for those host city delegates that were on a previous session with Aoife from the European Society of Cardiology, that whole discussion around the vision, the mission of a conference, and coming back into the city support there, Virginie, you were talking there about funding support for conferences. Now, are we as the industry saying that it's about the delegate numbers that are important, or are we saying it's about the subject matter that's important? What do Brussels, as you as a city, see as that legacy for conferences? What does it mean to you?
Well, actually, we try to be in contact with the association and to see what the needs are. But it's true that we cannot focus on the number of delegates anymore. So we have to rethink that. And I think the legacy, it doesn't matter if the Congress is there with 1,000 or 10 participants. I think the subject is really important, and the manner on how this subject is communicated, or the connections that are made in the city where it's organized. We are lucky, we have the European Union and all these European commissions, and so we have a lot of congresses that are coming to us to be in contact with them. So it doesn't matter if they are 10,000 or 200, they just need to be in contact with these persons, and that's what we try to do. And actually we are working on a lot of virtual events for the moment that are willing, they're willing to be in contact with the European Commission, because they want to change a little bit their conferences, their meetings. Some of them want to switch from a big congress to some really focused meetings where they want to have a really specified connection with a city or a person or organism. So we see a change for the moment. So they want more focused meetings instead of a really big congress. Of course, it's for the moment not possible. It's not possible in Brussels for the moment, in Belgium, but in a lot of other cities too. So we try to find with them what's the best solution. So that's our job, is to see what are the needs from each association, and we try to be there and answer all these questions and find solutions with them.
Mm-hmm. So coming to you, Emily, on that part, do you see opportunity here for associations? Is this something that, in that partnership approach of hearing what the cities and nations and venues are asking of associations to share that vision and mission, is there work still to be done amongst associations on articulating what that legacy benefit is moving forward, as opposed to the number of people having cups of tea or staying in hotels. Where do you see the association's role in articulating that important message?
Sure. I think it does need to shift. Going back to Angie's point about sustainability, we need to collectively, as a movement, associations are as guilty as anyone else, about bragging about how many people we flew into a particular place on the planet for a ridiculously short amount of time and then shipped home again. So shifting our mindset away from success being the biggest, the broadest number of countries represented or regions represented, to looking at it's the quality over the quantity. I think the IAS has always put a lot of emphasis on that legacy piece. So we identify a relevant local NGO that delegates are able to make a contribution to through the registration system. We recruit thousands of volunteers for our events in the space, because we know, nothing against hostesses, but if we can give that spot to a medical student that otherwise wouldn't be able to afford the registration fee, that's going to have a lasting impact. And so it's looking at things like that and getting those initiatives that we're putting out there as counting towards the local legacy, the local impact. Going back to Neil's point about raising the profile of our industry collectively in the eyes of the various host governments that we work with around the world, instead of it being heads and beds that are reported on and how much revenue is generated through hotel tax, looking at some of that quantitative projects that we as associations love to do. Our local partners love to have the excuse, if you will, of having this international spotlight focused on their work. And so really making those efforts count as well towards the various subvention that we all need.
Mm-hmm. Neil, this very much aligns into Scottish Government discussions and focus and alignment. It's a world that you and your team are very much aligned to. Do you want to come in on what Emily's just been saying there?
Yeah, definitely. I think we're driving this whole initiative of trying to align everything we do to policy at a far greater level than identifying a few economic sectors. But Emily's exactly right. It is the focus, the traditional focus on the spend, the bums and beds of business events, that means we have been stuck in the mass gatherings label or bucket. We've been dragged into the tourism bucket throughout this pandemic, because all we do is broadcast how many thousands of delegates we're bringing and how much they'll spend in the pubs and how much they'll spend on gifts to take home. We have to move on from this and stop being apologetic about the real reason that people meet. Meeting with a purpose has always been important, and that long before COVID came along. But now it's more important than ever. And as Aileen alluded to, we're working in Scotland to something called the policy-driven model that we're selling to Scottish Government. And this has about 300 moving parts, whether it's the UN Sustainable Development Goals, Scotland's national indicators, there's about 100 of them. There's 40 different directorates at the Scottish Government. And the whole point is that we need to move business events from being a contributor to over-tourism, which frankly it is in some cases, to saying, no, these are affluent, educated experts in their field who incidentally are going to spend millions, and incidentally our type of events are the most immeasurable part of the visitor economy by miles. We know the flight, we know where they stayed, we know where they had dinner, we know everything. Never mind trying to have mitigations for COVID. But we can be demonstrating that we're solving perhaps a local problem, transportation, or a global problem like AIDS or the current pandemic. we can demonstrate that our cities or our regions and our nation is at the forefront of policy area X, Y, or Z, and is a good global citizen by doing so. So the legacy is going to come out of whatever the purpose is at the front end. And that's why we are embarking on a 10-year program called the policy-driven model that is literally going to turn it on its head, but that we can connect it to what Scotland is trying to do. And happily enough, that will align with what Glasgow is trying to do, what Edinburgh is trying to do, Dundee, Aberdeen, and also don't forget our universities like St Andrews. And this is what I mean about the pandemic being an opportunity that we cannot miss the boat here. Everything that's happening in our industry, whether it's trade shows or the change of how things were being done, the questions about getting on a plane for a 3.5-hour meeting, all of that was going to happen anyway in the next 5 years. But we all thought it was going to happen slightly more slowly and at a pace we could control. The pandemic has hit the fast forward button. This all happened within the last 6 months. And we have to re-emerge from this with a different name, people knowing that, of course, we are part of the tourism sector. Yeah, that'd be insane to pretend we're not part of tourism, but we are sector and academic showcases that happen to use tourism infrastructure. And that's a very, very important distinction. And I'm optimistic about the future, but I think we need to seize the moment. And I think everyone here on this panel is very much on the same page. And we can't have our eggs all in one basket again and wait for the pandemic to force our hands.
Mm-hmm. We definitely need to start putting that onus on the work that goes into the word networking and get that back on the table again. And I think the more of the sessions that we're having like this and the Teams meetings and Zoom meetings is doing a fabulous trade for face-to-face meetings. I think it just makes us miss them even more. So thank you very much. I'm going to move to Nicky for questions. Yes, please.
We just had something quite interesting in from Leslie Williams, who was saying it's a positive, which kind of resonates with what you've just been saying, Neil. It's a positive impact that a conference creates and delivers. It should be the key focus. But she also asked, has COVID helped destinations, venues and associations get that message across to governments? Which I think you're very much saying is exactly what we're delivering. We've fast forwarded all of those things and you are getting that message across.
We are making progress on getting that message across. But one thing I coined, and you can say you heard it here first, bed nights and brains. That's what business events brings, not just bed nights. I also had one more thing to say about the contracting, which I know is a while ago, but it says we've got 4 hours, 12 minutes left. So I was going to just mention with the contracting, as some colleagues in Las Vegas, and the principle is the same, but they made it clear that they had groups turning up in March into early April who were cancelling on the day. So people were cancelling as they checked in. That's a legacy of the way that Vegas used to contract when you have that number of rooms and that amount of space. But at the same time, Caesar's Palace isn't building a massive expo center just because all the money's coming through the gaming tables. You know, that business events is a massive part of Vegas. But my friends there said it's all about the language of contracting moving forward. It's not about all the risk landing on the hotel, the venue. It has to be but it has to be more than just redefining what force majeure is. I think everyone's scampering off, inserting force majeure, including pandemic. You know, it needs to be much more than that. And I think for the role of people like myself and Aileen and Virginia, that we've never really got involved in telling hotels or venues, the private sector, what to charge. That's not our job. They're running the business. I would never tell Gleneagles or the Hilton in Glasgow what to charge a particular group. However, we can indicate if we think their rates are, you know, they're going to lose it for a silly reason or something like that. But I think it's going to become much more of a shared thing with the contracting moving forward of flexibility, whether it's built in, that it can roll forward without a complete recontracting. But it can't just all fall onto the venues and hotels to flex. It needs to work both ways. That's it.
Thank you very much, Neil. Nicky, any questions for the panel that you'd like to pose?
Yes, Jane Cunningham has written to us, and a question for Emily. What steps can associations take to ensure that their meetings focus more on how their meeting can have a positive on the society where the meeting is being held, and help the association get closer to their mission?
So what we need to do to help ourselves?
To make sure that your meetings still maintain that focus to on your mission of working with the host city.
Absolutely. So things that we're certainly exploring. For example, we provide 10% of our participants each year come on a bursary or a scholarship, and that includes their flight, their hotel, as well as the conference registration. One of the things that we're looking at doing in the future is we've made this incredible effort to get them there. Instead of flying them home after 1 week, could we look at keeping them there for a second week and engaging with local universities, local teaching hospitals, etc., so that there's a more extended but real world exchange of best practice and lessons learned from those local contexts where we happen to be taking the convention, the conference, as an example. I think other things that we are in our bid document, we're always asking for the narrative. Why should we? What's our historical connection to come to a city, in terms of the city's role in shaping the HIV response? And then what are the things that are coming up on the policy agenda, on the research pipeline, that having the conference in that place will enable us to highlight? So when, as an example, in 2008, we brought the conference, our large conference, to Mexico City. As a result, Mexico City legalized same-sex marriage, and by the end of the year, the conference had managed to help the local movement there pass nationwide legalization of same-sex marriage. And that kind of policy impetus changes the country in incredible ways. And I think if we are able to tell those stories in better ways, ourselves, as look, we do make positive, we are changing the world, and it's not just by handing out 7 tons of condoms over the course of a week. It's really making these big lasting impacts.
So Emily, do you feel that despite the events moving more to virtual or hybrid, that you'll still be able to maintain some sort of legacy in that way?
We absolutely hope so, and in some ways, again, what our board meeting this morning was just talking about was how you need that global catalyst, or that global consolidation of energy and effort and focus on key issues in the association's mission, to then trickle down and have those same kinds of impact on a local level in a locally relevant way. So, it's one thing if you have a nation that signed on to the global anti-smoking policy that's established by the WHO, but if your local context still allows smoking in restaurants, then that's what you need to do. And somehow having that, the global local kind of gravitational pull working with each other, then it's better able to move things forward and keep things progressing.
Okay, I've just had another question from Leslie Williams, who says they are interested to hear from the panel what their thoughts are around government potentially requiring evidence from visitors of being vaccinated, and what effect could that have on delegate numbers for international meetings. Neil, would you like to?
My fear? Oh, sorry. I was just going to say my fear is it's going to create a have and a have not participation in events. We'll have people coming from countries that are able to afford the vaccine, and no attendance for people not coming from countries able to afford the vaccines. And for international events, that's going to be an issue.
Angie, at your venue, are you going to ask whether delegates have had a test? Are you going to ask at the venue that they have a vaccine? Are you going to be moderating that at your venue at all?
It's going to depend entirely on what government dictate as part of the SOP. The standard operating procedure, totally at the moment controlled by the National Security Council around issues like that. I wanted to take a step back, if I may, just talk about legacy and social impact and on some of the points Emily made. You know, I think what's going to be amazing moving forward is how I think associations both are going to be able to broaden their audience, because this whole process of virtual participation and access and affordability for people to be able to get that education, that content, it's going to become so much more accessible. And I also think that content is going to have a life of its own now, because people don't have to be at the event to access that vital, important information. We know how important the face-to-face contact is and how we want to be there. But the one thing that is also beneficial now is that there's going to be broader access, and it's going to make the whole process a bit more, I think, there'll be more diversification, there'll be more participation. Because suddenly people who cannot be there physically can still get access to important information and still feel like they're part of a process and that they can contribute. But when it comes to the vaccination and the testing issue, I'll give you an example. When we were allowed to reopen for a very short window, we all had to be COVID tested. It was an absolute requirement by government that every person, and it was also by our owners. We were not allowed to come back onto site after working from home without all having a COVID test. But the issue with the COVID test is you have it today and you're negative, but what happens next week when you've been out in the community? So those are difficult questions, but I think for a lot of people, it's very much about what government dictates, and what what phase of lockdown you're in, what is happening with clusters and increases in numbers. And I think the destinations that get the vaccine application going first will probably be the ones to watch and see how it all unravels, if I can put it that way, or rolls out. So it's difficult to say what the requirements are going to be around people being, you know, whether you'll allow someone into the venue because they've been vaccinated or because they can prove they've had a test.
Yeah, I think this year is going to be a strange year. When I say this year, I mean 2021. Let's agree we're into 2021. I think there is a risk of have and have-nots. I read this morning in the paper, whether it's true or not, that there's a view that some of the richer nations are stockpiling, and I can see that would be a problem. And I think, to Angie's point, this is way, way, way up at the very top level of government, you know, and that's a lot of what we might want to do. There's really not much we can do about it, but I think business events, as ever, should be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And again, if we can flag the definition of exactly who we're trying to bring into our cities and countries, with the greatest respect to everyone wanting to jump on a plane to the sun, you know, that's not the reason to get a vaccine for us. It's we want travel to resume, but the sort of person we would like to be able to attend, you know, from all corners of the world, you know, they are going to be contributing to some kind of problem needing discussed. And yes, we can do it like this, but we all know it's not the same, and it's not sustainable. But I think 2021 will have that sort of characteristic. I would like to think that by 2022, even those at the back of the queue will have got their batches. I think the view, what I know is that I'm in the age range to get the vaccine. I know it's hard to believe, but I'll be amazed if I get mine before April. But if I do, I would hope to have my first long-haul business events trip in June. So that's the sort of time scale we're thinking.
I appreciate it's different across the globe as well, and I think that's the thought from the WHO and the UN, is that we're not over this until we're all over this. And I think as a business events community, especially looking at the international association world, it has to be for everybody. Picking up on Emily's point, that the whole idea of having an international association is to be inclusive and not exclusive. So I think that's the world of our support as the industry for you as associations, Emily, is that we all appreciate that, and it's hugely important to all of us. As we're coming to our final few minutes, Virginie, do you want to pick up on any of those points regarding legacy or government's understanding of the conference world from the Brussels perspective?
Yes, well, actually about legacy, I mentioned before, it's not about the amount of persons, but we try to fix together with the association how we can include or have a legacy in our destination. So we check together what we can do and what added value the Convention Bureau can mean, of course. And for the government, it depends on which one. We have, for Brussels, a good contact with our Brussels government, so that's really nice. They are listening to us. Of course, it's not easy. I think we have all the same problem. It's not recognized like it should be recognized, our industry way. Nice, because we heard, and that's great, because we can make it moving forward, and so it's really positive and it's motivating that they are listening to us.
Thank you. And Emily, to finish off the discussion, would you like to say your thoughts after this discussion, just to round everything off for us?
I am so looking forward to 2021, 2022. I'm so looking forward to that moment, the day before the conference opens, and you've got everything still building up, and you've got everything coming together, and you're doing that last walkthrough with the venue manager, and you know that magic is going to lights, camera, and change the world. That's what we do. And I think it's fantastic, this opportunity, as Neil said, to really galvanize us as associations, venues, and convention bureaus to blow our own horn a bit better, and really take our own center stage in saying what a positive impact that our industry has. I think it's also really exciting. People go through their whole lives as here in Switzerland as making chocolate or making watches or being in a bank, and things tend to stay the same. I think we've got and the generation of event organizers ahead of us did pretty much the same thing their entire existence. I think we have a really exciting opportunity, as scary as it has been, to kind of take this moment and learn and make the most of it. But learning together will certainly make the learning better and richer.
That's lovely. Well said, everybody. And thank you very much for this unashamedly conference session at Host City. So we do hope that those that joined from a major events perspective have enjoyed dipping their toe into the world of conferences and associations. Lights, camera, change the world is so a hashtag for 2021. We will use that, definitely, Emily. So as we roll into the final few minutes, thank you so much to this engaging and expert and charming panel. Thank you, Virginie from Brussels Convention Bureau. Neil, lovely to see you, sir. Visit Scotland. Angie, all the best. Enjoy your evening in KL. Nicky, so good to be working with you from Refocus Communications. And of course, Emily, thank you so much and all the very best with your social world for IAS. You certainly are changing the world for the better. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. It's been delightful to have you with us, however virtually, and we shall keep in touch. Goodbye, everybody. Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.